Joint Secretary, Mr. Kulkarni, kindly come on the dais and chair the session. I also invite Dr. Professor, Principal Scientist, ISIL, to come on the dais. Other speakers are online, available, already joined. Professor Dr. M. Gandhi, sir has already joined. Gunjan has also joined. And Sara, are you there? He is also there. Thank you. So now the floor is to Chair, Dr. Mukherjee.
Colleagues, members of the EC and friends, we have a very contemporary topic today. This is the BBNJ, as it is called, or it's also in many other places it's called the agreement that addresses biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction. Before I hand over the floor to the first speaker, let me exercise my discretion and say a few words. The treaty is it's a fruit of long-standing negotiation, not only within the ambit of the Law of the Sea Convention, but also being influenced by other treaty regimes like the Nagoya Protocol on Access and Benefit Sharing of Genetic Resources that deals with terrestrial or genetic resources, access to genetic resources. It's also a fruition of how you largely want to protect the marine environment beyond national jurisdiction. If you look at UNCLOS provides protection of the marine environment not only within maritime zones, but it does it beyond national jurisdiction in the high seas. And I think in that sense, it's a very comprehensive regime. But there are specific areas where more legislation, more international treaties were required to strengthen international cooperation. And this was one area which was very important. I'll just take 5 minutes to tell you what in my view are the highlights. Maybe it's also for the benefit of the speakers. This treaty, which has been adopted after the 5th session, the work on this treaty began in 2005, and the treaty is, it's called an agreement. The exact name is the Agreement on the Conservation and Sustainable Use of Marine Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction. It addresses marine genetic resources, including sharing of benefits. It has a number of tools called as the area-based management tools. It also includes a section on marine protection areas, MPAs, which have been in the Antarctic Treaty regime for a very long time. Slightly contentious area, but this has been included here too. It has a section on capacity building and transfer of marine technology. It has a number of other cross-cutting issues like most treaties have, dealing with institutional mechanisms, implementation and compliance, financial resources, dispute settlement provisions, as well as final clauses. The objective is very similar to the Biodiversity Treaty, the Convention, is to ensure conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity and areas beyond national jurisdiction through effective implementation of the relevant provisions of the Convention. The scope of the treaty is beyond national jurisdiction, which would include high seas and area. We will not go what this specific application is, but it tells in very clear terms high seas and the area. The agreement does not apply to any warship, doesn't apply to any military aircraft or naval auxiliary. The agreement, as it is an implementation agreement under UNCLOS, it should be interpreted and applied in the context and in a manner consistent with the Law of the Sea Convention. Nothing in this agreement shall prejudice the rights, jurisdiction and duties of states under UNCLOS. It provides for a fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from activities with respect to marine genetic resources and digital sequence information. It provides, as I told in the beginning, apart from marine genetic resources, it also provides for monetary as well as non-monetary resources. And these shall be managed by an international body through various means such as milestone payments, payments of contribution related to commercialization, a tiered structure of fees being paid, and many other issues. I'm not going to speak about this, there are speakers. You have provisions on environment impact assessment, you have provisions on capacity building, you have an implementation committee. This can be an issue that will throw a challenge, something similar to what the Montreal Protocol on ozone depleting substances is there. It's a testament of a very effective implementation and compliance mechanism that has not only reduced ODS or ozone depleting substances in the world, but it is something which other compliance mechanisms follow. So it provides one. It also has scientific bodies, apex plenary bodies like the Conference of Parties, the scientific and technical body, most of the climate change treaty regime, the biodiversity, the desertification ones, they all have apex bodies, Conference of Parties. It has a similar one. It has a secretariat, it has a capacity building and transfer of marine technology. The dispute settlement, it's a vast thing, I'm not going to go in this, but it is very similar to what exists under the Law of the Sea Convention. It shall enter into force 120 days after the deposit of the 60th instrument of ratification, very similar to what the Law of the Sea provides. It provides for no reservation, the treaty provides for no reservations except which may be made to the agreement unless expressly permitted by other articles of this agreement. However, it does not preclude a state or a regional economic integration organization while signing, ratifying, approving, accepting or acceding to this agreement from making declarations or statements. These declarations should not be in the form of interpretative declarations. That can be in the form of reservation. They have to be declarations which can be appended. It's a subject matter which states can always agree, or states can protest and say that they can't agree to this declaration. Last one para I will say, what is the important legal significance of this agreement? Although many people say that it has filled up a lacuna, it has codified law of the sea in the area of marine biodiversity, it has filled in the gap. A gap analysis by countries would be required to bring their own domestic law in place. But to be fair to the drafters of the Law of the Sea Convention, it was an old 1982 convention, and nobody really knew that marine genetic resources beyond national jurisdiction can become such a contentious issue. And every treaty cannot provide for everything. I think there is a section on marine scientific research in the Law of the Sea Convention. There is a section on area, but what is there in the water column is something which could not be envisaged in 1982. So, in that sense of the term, the significance would be an ordered international management of something which most developing and poorer countries have recognized as a common heritage of mankind. Now, this common heritage of mankind, as the word suggests, should be preserved, should not be exploited, should be used for common good. But I think you have a treaty now which says that not only the richer countries of the world, but also the developing and poorer countries of the world need to have a share in these subthermal plants and number of other, marine, biobenthic organisms. They should not only have a right to access, which the richer countries have the technology, but they also should be shared beneficially for the benefit of all other countries. Having said this, I now call upon the first speaker, Dr. Gandhi. He is a former Joint Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, in the same division I work. He has also been a dean in VIT Chennai. He would be speaking on the High Seas Treaty, an integrated approach to protection, preservation of marine environment, and sustainable use of marine genetic resources in terms of areas beyond national jurisdiction and sustainable use of marine genetic resources. Sir, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Luther. First of all, my apologies not to be there to present physically due to some inconvenience. Good afternoon to everyone, the chair as well as the panelists. Although I have given a very long title, only repeating what the title of the instrument is, but I intend to dwell more on the marine genetic resources, including the reciprocal sharing of benefits. Originally, only this was the issue that has been focused. The developing countries wanted to focus on this. Rest of the things have been added as a package, as far as I know. So what is important here is not to just discuss more on the text of the convention, like what we have, because we have, but what was the politics, science behind the convention, how that has been reflected, and a wonderful, the bird's eye view has been given by Dr. Luther. He explained that it is not one legal instrument. This legal instrument is made up of parts of so many legal instruments, as well as the very movement of international law in relation to environmental law and biodiversity, and again benefits from them. All of them are captured in one go. Now let me talk on this subject in three parts. The first part is about what is the history. Second part is about what is the importance of science and technology. How the powerful encash being first come first served basis, whatever is available, which otherwise could be a common heritage of mankind, but in 1982 convention, it was not made as common heritage of mankind, and that resulted in a long and tedious process of 20 years negotiation in different phases. And finally, it is culminated into a legally binding instrument where most so far done voluntarily have been made as compulsory. And the institution has been created. There is a clear organizational structure to do this in a nice fashion. Now let me just look into first the history of it. The adoption of the legally binding instrument on conservation and sustainable use of marine genetic resources of area beyond national jurisdiction is truly a diplomatic achievement of the century, and more importantly, an achievement for the developing countries. The strategy to have legally binding instrument or marine genetic resources without affecting any of the provisions of UNCLOS 1982 has evolved over the years since 2003 Secretary General's report on oceans and lobbies. The report revolved around bioprospecting of sensitive and vulnerable ecosystem around sea mounts and hypothermal vents. as the novel organisms found in that area were found useful as raw material for developing pharmaceuticals for the treatment of HIV and cancer. It has been known then that areas beyond national jurisdiction lie outside the exclusive economic zone and of coastal states covering 61% of the ocean surface, 73% of its volume. This vast area contains a rich biodiversity of marine life representing nearly 4 billion years of evolution, ranging from viruses and bacteria to the largest animal ever to exist on Earth, the blue whale. It was feared at the time that hectic secret activities of sample collection in deep sea environment in the name of marine scientific research, which was open to all, and the name of marine scientific research, which is open to all under UNCLOS 1982, would disrupt the ecosystem and destroy the rare species. As you know, the marine genetic resources derived out of marine biodiversity include the genetic information of marine organisms, which enabling the biochemical and pharmaceutical companies to produce a wide range of biochemicals that can benefit humankind through applications of biodiscovery of pharmaceutical compounds, cosmetics, food supplements, research tools, and in industrial process. They also include adaptive solutions found in deep sea organisms that can also inspire several materials and structural designs to that. Additional applications of new genetic tools and technologies include tackling invasive species, prevention of biofouling on the hulls of the vessels, bioremediation, and wildlife management. Developing states wanted to arrest this trend of harvesting the marine genetic resources in the name of marine scientific research. They started arguing that bioprospecting is a commercial activity that cannot be brought under marine scientific research under UNCLOS 1982. They argued further that UNCLOS does not deal with biogenetic resources and entire biogenetic resources beyond national jurisdiction should be treated as common heritage of mankind, as the original General Assembly resolution made it clear that resources in the area beyond national jurisdiction, either living or non-living, should be treated as common heritage of mankind. The first statement to that effect was made by India in the meeting of the UN informal consultative process in 2003. That means we are the pioneers in fact, pushing this kind of a legal instrument, and it was supported by first three countries, India, Egypt, and Mexico. Then all the three countries jointly approached the G77, and it is a very big group today, about 143 countries, and all of them, they joined together. So the relevant part of the statement made by India reads as follows. We believe that the living resources on the seabed, owing to the symbiotic relationship with the other resources on the deep sea environment, become inseparable from other resources of the seabed and form part of common heritage of mankind. We also believe that distinction between pure and applied marine scientific research is sought to be maintained on the basis of a dubious logic and has never been accepted universally, as there is no perceivable differences in activity or method. A difference in purpose does not make marine scientific research a profit-motivated activity labeled as bioprospecting, any less subject to regulations and discipline of the convention. In both cases, either investigation into certain organism or harvesting of certain organisms in that natural habitat is taking place. In our view, all marine scientific research in the seabed and subsoil beyond the national jurisdiction should be conducted for the benefit of mankind as a whole, in the absence of appropriate regulation guaranteeing benefit sharing, whether it is related to genetic or other resources in the seabed. We agree with the view that Convention on Biological Diversity and the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea complementary to each other as they emphasize on a fair and equitable distribution of benefits from the resources. We believe that harmonious construction or provisions of these two conventions could provide a substantive legal basis for the conservation and management of biodiversity and the use of biological and biogenetic resources of the deep sea bed and subsoil, a common heritage of mankind. However, the procedural regulation concerning the exploration, exploitation of biogenetic resources and the benefit sharing aspects required to be developed preferably without amending either of the conventions. I end quote. So the group of 77 in China, now with 143 states, also made a statement in General Assembly, closely following the statement of India. Ever since these constant efforts have been made by developing countries to bringing marine biodiversity in the area beyond national jurisdiction under the ambit of common heritage of mankind. The developed countries resisted this extension. They wanted status quo to have and make use of the freedom of the sea unrestricted in the area beyond national jurisdiction, so that commercial activities like bioprospecting and utilization of marine genetic resources would go on unrestricted. So during the 2 decades of discussions and negotiations on marine genetic resources, the harvesting and utilization of genetic resources are happening with great speed by developing countries' corporations. Because of the fact that genetic resources in world oceans are of actual and potential interest to commercial uses. The ratio of potentially useful natural compounds is higher in marine than terrestrial organisms. There is a higher probability of commercial success with marine sources of material. There are numerous patents based on marine genetic resources and products are on the market. According to one source, thousands of interesting compounds have been discovered from sponge and associated bacteria. And one of the very first drugs was discovered from sponge. A quick search for 40 patents relating to deep sea sponges are in fact accepted. Compounds in clinical and preclinical trials also happening, and it could eventually command about $1 billion US dollar per year market. This is about why developing countries are keen on having a legally binding instrument on conservation of marine genetic resources and equitable sharing of benefits from marine genetic resources. Any new instrument to be developed should not touch UNCLOS 1982 regime. This means Chapter 11, dealing with the area, Chapter 12, protection and preservation of marine environment, Chapter 13, marine scientific research, and Chapter 14, development and transfer of marine technology of UNCLOS 1982, which built on then and available scientific knowledge, needs to be added on by integrating learned experiences from implementation of CBD, Nagoya Protocol, and developments of environmental law and climate change. All these things are super added as elements to be considered in the negotiating process along with relevant SDGs. What is the process? The process of negotiation, the second phase. Initially, the discussion on new instrument has taken place in 4 sessions in the format of ad hoc open-ended working group. On 19 June 2015, following recommendation from ad hoc open-ended informal working group, a study issues relating to the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity beyond areas of national jurisdiction, the UN General Assembly adopted by consensus resolution 69292 relating to the development of an internationally legally binding instrument under the United Nations Convention on the Law of Sea on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction. A preparatory committee, called shortly PROPCOM, was established by Resolution 69-292 with a mandate to make substantive recommendations to the General Assembly on the elements of the draft text of an international legally binding instrument under the UNCLOS. The negotiations added for four main topics, the one of which I am concentrating, intended as a package in the same that none of them can be separated from others, namely, first, marine genetic resources, including questions on the sharing of benefits. Second, measures such as area-based management tools, including marine protected areas. Then thirdly, environmental impact assessment. And finally, capacity building and transfer of marine technology. The PROPCOM had 4 sessions. Later, on the basis of recommendation of the PROPCOM, the General Assembly by Resolution 72-249 of 24th December 2017 decided to convene an intergovernmental conference with a view to developing the above mentioned instrument as soon as possible. The first session of the conference, chaired by Ms. Rena Lay of Singapore, was held in September 2018. It went on till 2023, June, and they had sessions till the instrument was adopted by consensus on 19 June 2023. Now, on profit share, benefit sharing, what were all the discussions they had, at least in the PROPCOM? The present aid to negotiation shows that alternative between both counts of benefit, monetary and non-monetary on the one hand, and only non-monetary benefits on the other is crucial question that still needs to be settled till the last moment. Then, for the purpose of this part, the term benefit shall mean monetary and non-monetary benefits, and this is what the Luther observed that. It included, but is not limited to, capacity building, the exchange of public availability of information and scientific knowledge, access to samples and sample collections, access to technology and technological knowledge, and transfer of technology. Benefits arising from the use of marine genetic resources of areas beyond national jurisdiction may be shared on voluntary basis. Now the voluntary has been almost made as mandatory. And I know that will be developed how mandatory it is by the COP. So far, only few states and private entities have access to financial tools and sophisticated technologies needed to reach the deep sea bed and take samples organisms found there. In order to study and isolating the laboratory genetic material deriving from such organisms, the result of this kind of activity would be then patenting of commercially valuable products to put them on the market. As has been stated earlier, in 2006, the subject of international regime for such resources began to be discussed within the already mentioned working group, and opposite views were put forward by states concerned. Several states, especially within the group of developing countries, took the position that UNCLOS principle of common heritage of mankind applies also to marine genetic resources. Principle of common heritage of mankind applies also to marine genetic resources, and that the mandate of ISDA should cover also such resources. And this is always, a third world view. Other states, in particular, some developed countries, relied on the principle of freedom of the high seas, which would imply freedom of access to an unrestricted exploitation of these seabed genetic resources. I understand, they could not reconcile this problem till the end of the last session. And finally, if you see that, the group of 77 statements after adoption, you would see that, this was lingering for almost in all sessions. So, the United States statements they made, they were consistent on this. There is no legal gap in regard to marine genetic resources in areas beyond national jurisdiction. Rather, these resources fall under the high seas regime of international law, as reflected in the Law of the Sea Convention. Marine genetic resources is already areas beyond national jurisdiction are not covered by provisions pertaining to International Seabed Authority or the area, except as part of the marine environment that must be protected in connection with activities in the area, which are defined as activities of exploration for and exploitation of the resources of the area. In the context of area, that means it is only about what? Mineral resources, non-living resources. However, the difference are ironed out and the instrument has been adopted by consensus. The outcome of the negotiation is now reflected in Part 2 of BBNJ Treaty. BBNJ Treaty is novel for it deals with general principles and approaches in Article 7 as follows.
Dr. Gandhi,
in order to achieve, yes.
Sorry, maybe a few minutes you can wind up, or?
No, I can wind up because whatever I wanted to just state, I have stated only three minutes is sufficient for me. So whatever said and done now, what has been done in all the parts which are all in place earlier in different instruments. But those observations are made on the voluntary basis. Now they have made it that organizationally it is not voluntary, it is compulsory, you have to adhere to the conditions. Now only one thing that I want to say, this is only now the important thing is, whenever somebody is going there, a corporation or otherwise, and they have to send a notification, and where they want to really have all these things, and the collector, they have to inform, and what is the outcome of the collection. If it is the right thing or patent or any other thing, they have to inform to the clearing house. And the clearing house is not a physical clearing house, and it will be completely internet accessed web. Therefore, anybody can access those resources also. And most importantly, this kind of arrangement is important because every cruise for collection of the scientific material, especially from the bottom of the sea, that cost about billions of dollars, not millions. So, if that is going to happen, and the poor countries are not afford to do that. Therefore, you have to make something to that, and this instrument made it possible. But this is only the beginning, because there are 2-3 statements, important statements. If you see that, you can find that the Russian Federation is not in fact joined with the consensus, and US has joined with the consensus with lot of reservations, and all the reservations are their own points they argued during negotiation, they put it as a reservation. Then thirdly, importantly, China says that if the disputed areas of where the China has a disputed area of a territory beyond national jurisdiction, and those areas, and the China will not accept anything on that. So it is only the beginning, and if it takes at least for this the UNCLOS so many years, and it will take naturally so many years for the 60 ratification. Anyway, it is open for signature from 20th September this month, and we have to wait for what is going to happen there. And maybe COP is very stronger. That means the important phase of the fight is over, and the developing countries continue to fight. Otherwise, whatever they got it in a legally binding instrument, and that can easily be stolen back. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi, for that very thought-provoking presentation. We'll come back to the subjects. Let us first run through the speakers. We are racing slightly against time. Thank you so much. The next speaker on our list is Dr. Sudhir Kochar. He is a former national coordinator, that is the Basic Strategic Research, DSR component, NAIP, this is I think an innovation, what is it? Yeah, National Agricultural Innovation Project of ICAR. And he's going to speak on challenges and opportunities of innovative harnessing from BBNJ for resilience and sustainability. I think these are two important issues of resilience and sustainability. Over to you, Dr. Kocha.
Dignitaries, elites of ISIL, faculty of ISIL, students, and delegates. I am not basically from earth science area or the oceans area. I am an agricultural scientist. We were concerned with plant genetic resources, and I have been into it since the fourth technical conference of FAO in 1995. So it was having global plant attraction. Are you not able to hear? Okay. So I was interestingly seeing some dates. UNCLOS came in 1982, and it was the Commission on Plant Genetic Resources in FAO that came in 1983, which gave rise to international undertaking on plant genetic resources, which was a non-legally binding agreement, to which there were 111 members, and conspicuously USA was never there, and they were also not there for Convention on Biological Diversity. But when this international undertaking was transformed to the you can say IDPJ, the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture, which came into effect in 2004. It was almost at that time that again this issue of BBNJ was in 2005 brought forward to be negotiated and all. So that is the sort of chronology I could just share with you. And I am basically a plant breeder. We are a habit of having a nonsense correlation at least. And what does nonsense correlation means is that when statistics applied, analyzed and interpreted on the tag plants does not work, then just based on our own experience in the field on the crop growing, we select certain plants with the hope that with more than 50% probability new variety will come out of this plant. And that is where going to the jurisdiction beyond national jurisdiction, I have now thought of what is happening. Most recently we have gone up to the level of Aditya. Here the question I have posed is, what is ignorance? Because the moon does not know law, and it says where ignorance is bliss, it is folly to be wise. But the law will perturb moon also, because now there are so many stakeholders and so many competitors going to the voyage of moon. And here, the naming of the landing point of our recent voyager into moon, which is Shiv Shakti, which can be pronounced in two alternative ways. One is Shiv and Shakti, two separate words, and second is Shiv Shakti, single word. And why I want to bring this into a discussion right in the beginning, not opening it for any political or any ideological or any religious discussion, but for tangible versus intangible. And when you talk of Shiv Shakti, as per the subject matter that I am trained in, I know that there are areas where there are cells having totipotency. The omnipotent is there, the cells, individual cells have totipotency, and they are the undifferentiated state. And you see Ardhanareshwara is Shiv Shakti when used in one word. And that is where it gives you additional space to think further, that without getting horrified from the artificial intelligence that we were having in the previous session, you have to keep on working in the area of human intelligence, because that is the ultimate appeasing force that you can create from the positive vibes. I don't say what we are. What we are, we are. That's all. And then, now this is interconnected sea challenges. I have not put the word anything else. This sea challenges is, you can say, a fiction word, but it is huge challenge which involves ocean, climate, biodiversity, and we need law and policy mechanism to address the crisis related to all this. And here, as the chair had already told you, that it relates to the portion of global ocean, that is high seas, means vertical column in the sea. And when he says area, that is seabeds, ocean floor and subsoil. Just to clarify. Just to compare the terrestrial and the, you can say, marine side, we have got a peak in the mountain which is as high as more than 8,800 meter above mean sea level. But we have the deepest ocean trench which is more than 11,000 meters below the mean sea level, and it is in a widest trench in the you can say west northern Pacific Ocean. So it is that area where tussle goes on these days. I mean, China, Japan and India is also now coming into that, US, Australia and all. So this is an area. So now it is a most extensive yet poorly known main ecosystem type which can theoretically support active life inside. And this marine life is adapted to pressures up to 1,000 times more than that at the sea level. That means the terrestrial bodies or whatever pressure they can bear. So that means in the climate change scenarios, when we have to deal with such type of situations, we will have certain genic potentials from the sea organisms which can be used or which can be used in the therapy also. So then light cannot reach beyond 1,000 meter inside. So means up to 1 kilometer you can say that light is there, whether complete or partial, but beyond that it is dark, totally dark. More than 60% of the you can say above 25,000 known fish species, these occur in the ocean ecosystem, rest in the terrestrial ecosystem. Then there is plentiful of underwater fossilized and mineral resources in the marine areas, and living materials in open ocean beyond upper 1,000 meters is low compared to the terrestrial, you can say the forest ecosystems. So now what happened on 10th July 2003 in the 77th session of United Nations General Assembly, we said, well, it is agreed that the BBJ agreement is clear, although the text was to be further defined and all. They approved the repository function, secretarial function with the Secretary General of the UN for the time being as a matter of routine, and then they invited to submit this program budget for the next year, that is 2024, and also invited Secretary General to open the agreement for signatures, as Chair has already told you, and that it will come into effect when the 120 days have passed after opening the signatures, and at least 60 countries have already signed it, and then the rest will be accessing and all. So now this is something which was already shared with you, and I am just repeating. So a key focus area in this agreement is marine genetic resources. See, it is not biodiversity per se. So questions of over-exploitation of biological resources and all, these have been very cleverly taken into the backside. So it is only genetic resources. And when it comes to genetic resources, we cannot talk of genes also, because we have directly come to the DSI. So only molecular digital information which is likely to go to the global data sets, that is the type of information on which this agreement has helped as far as the genetic resources are concerned. So it does not cover explicitly addressing the overexploitation I told you and in situ conservation. But it may be argued when marine protected area are talked of, how it is not in situ conservation, but it's not the person having ordinary knowledge in the art who is talking to you, and that's why I am telling that this is so. Then, but the focus of that element is on tools for area-based management, as Chair had already told you in the very beginning, and that is the politics, particularly the global politics, where either the developed countries or the international NGOs recognized by the UN system, they will be operating, and this is what will happen. So now, richness as well as vulnerability of the marine biodiversity around seamounts, around hydrothermal vents, sponges, cold water coral, these require more discoveries and more scientific information, more refined management of increasing anthropogenic pressures posed by existing and emerging activities like fishing, mining, marine pollution, bioprospecting in the deep sea, etc. So, it is because of all these things that an element of multilateralism has been, you can say, just decoratively brought into it. What for multilateralism, and who is the multilateral party who will be able to contribute to that effect, because the developing world still is not capable enough, or you can say trained enough also, and not having those many material resources to explore and exploit in the deep seas. But they say that some multilateralism is there. And I compare this with multilateralism in the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. What happened there? There were some 4.5 lakh units of genetic resources available in the 16 international gene banks of the CGIR system, which were pledged to FAO through the formal contract arrangements. And it was the question of exchange of those materials, the money to be received as fees on those from the companies and from other stakeholders who ask for it and get the things, and the benefit sharing thereof. And that was the platform for multilateral sharing. But here it is a reverse thing, something that the powerfuls and that who are, you can say, knowledgeable and competent enough will collect from the sea, and some part of its digital information they will play in the generic information pool, and you can access that material from there. And the countries which are landlocked, those countries will also be part of the committees who will decide on high seas on that. So that means on voting side also they will be very, very clear and clever. So my point of sharing all these things on the platform of international law at an Indian institute who is capable of dealing with the international law is that all stakeholders must understand that it is a cause of raison d'etre of the global sovereign. So who is operating as global sovereign, and who will have the pull and push there, and where you have to have your own stand and keep yourself intact. And that is where MEA, that is where ISIL stand for, and they can take certain care of that. But you as a student have to think about all these things, make your assignments, understand the depth of this law, and grow with this law also in the days to come. Because time is a factor I will request ISIL to share the copies with you on your request and up to their discretion. But I will just quickly run on many of the things. I think you will, how much time you will give to me, sir? Okay, thank you very much. So nice. Okay, thank you. So this is another aspect. There were two things. One is the climate change issues were never there when the process for negotiation was, you can say, unclosed started in this. And second is the sustainable development goals. First, Millennium Development Goals and Sustainable Development Goals issues were not there at that time. But now, at this point in time, these two things will also correlate with that. So these are the additional points I bring to your information. As far as C part is concerned, this Sustainable Development Goal 14 talks of conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas and marine resources for sustainable development. And the Article 2, which is the objective, general objective, which this agreement says to ensure the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction and things like that. So this is something where we are now talking of the sustainable development goals. These are some of the points about the ocean emergency, and we have to be clear about reduction in the oxygen levels in the dead zones in the, and then we have to be clear about the suffocation due to plastics and all in the sea. We have to be clear about the warming in the sea affecting the whole ecosystem of the sea, and also the fish being caught in the sea, because only 20% of that is a legitimate harvest, and rest 80% we do not know, which are the means, because these will be illegal or uninformed and then restricted area in whatever way they are operating. But the point here is also that up to 80% of the harvest is done by, you can say, 2/3 of the small holder fishers, and the rest of that is being done by the big fishers, big catch companies. And there are points of interest. This point has not come under the BBNJ agreement, but it's a part of UNCLOS, which is interlinked and it relates to biodiversity. Now, this is for legal protection, the total parts, and substantive parts are part 2, 3, 4 and 5. And here we were talking about genetic resources only at this moment, and then this area-based management tools, environment and impact assessment and capacity building. And what will happen in capacity building? Maximum of the investment will be there for capacity building and maximum of utilization without any, you can say, material benefit to the developing countries will happen in this area is a point where you can intervene. So now, up to this almost last moment emphasis shifted to digital sequence information from IPR protection and management. Because I very categorically gave suggestions at Kochi in 2019 when these points were initially discussed, that how to manage this IPR and what should be the mechanism taken as a global sovereign by the UNO by some reforms. But now there is a change, since India still holds the G20 presidency and India still is a strongest competitor for the United Nations General Assembly. What I say is that you just change the name from United Nations, you can say Security Council, to United Nations Security and you can say this Sustainability Council. And in that case, you have certain 5 or 6 countries which are on the coastal areas in different continents of the world included into it, and they should automatically at the time of reform of the UN be brought into that. So this is just a thought on it. I will not go into detail because there is a push. One is that these are the terms. If something is defined in a particular way, you have to deal only with that term in that particular way, and these 14 terms you have to be very clear of. And then the next one, I compare this Annex 1 with the Annex 1 of ITPJFA. That Annex 1 is for the 65 crops. Here it is for certain things which are indicative criteria for identification of areas which have to be protected or for which some actions have to be taken. Similarly, for types of capacity building, there is Annexure 2 and which has to be very much understood. In the scope, I will conclude, sir. You have already told about these things. I will not say that it applies to the peaceful purposes and for peacetime and not to warship and not to other vessels, even which are government vessels for certain reasons. And then these general principles, polluter pay first and all, these things I have already listed for you to. Now this point, sir, if you give me 2 additional minutes, I want to bring to you is that this genesis is a information, the type of information that you will be bringing from DSI into this. And this information is by an international NGO which behaves like as if it is an official client or you can say official representative of FAO. Things have been made clear here, and I will not say since it is written, it will be going to you for your perusal and reference. And similarly, second point is about the permafrost vault of the Nordic, where again the germ plants from the entire world, almost the entire world is being held. And but if you say that the benefit sharing is equitable, I don't know how someone has to judge on that. And then there are some other challenges which are listed here. So finally, someone has to leave. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kochar. That was a very well-researched presentation, a lot of scientific aspects and law. And now I call upon the next speaker, Gunjan Sharma. She's a partner in Volterra Fieta. She'll be speaking on Mr. No? Sorry, I'm so sorry. He'll be speaking on states' obligations to biodiversity outside national jurisdiction in the light of climate change. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have a presentation if I could be allowed to share the screen. If not, I can continue without it. Okay, well, it's not letting me, but that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Of course.
We have allowed.
So, thank you for inviting me. The topic of my speech today, I had some slides, but they're not being shared. That's absolutely fine. I wanted to concentrate on a very narrow question, which I and my law firm have been dealing with in respect of the law of the sea, as we are counsel to a major island state in the current climate change advisory proceedings before the International Court of Justice and the various other entities. And that question, which relates to biodiversity beyond national jurisdictions, is presuming a state does not accede to the BBNJ, what is the obligation of the state to prevent or protect deleterious effects to the climate and the biodiversity outside any national jurisdiction, including at the high seas? We've had some excellent presentations today on the content of the BBNJ and the scientific reasons it's so important. By means of a quick summary, 64% of the ocean surface does not fall within a potential extended economic zone, constituting actually 95% because of the greater depths of the volume of the ocean. If this was truly terra nullius, then we would be facing a massive tragedy of the common. Our fishes, the mineral resources, the positive impacts on the climate caused by ocean currents would all be amenable to immediate destruction, or not immediate destruction, but destruction, by any party that saw fit. Yet at the same time, there is a theoretical lacuna in the concept of transboundary harm as it is practiced in international law. And this theoretical lacuna, this hole, emerges because the classical formulation of transboundary harm comes from the Latin precept, the Justinian precept, sic ature tua ut alinum non laedis. You see that, for instance, in the Trail Smelter case in ICJ. And in Latin, the phrase sic ature tua ut alinum means you cannot use what is owned by you. So a state cannot use its own ownership to harm ut alienum, what is owned by another. In the classical formulation of the transboundary harm principle, harm, you are required only not to harm another's possession. And the problem becomes, strictly speaking, the area outside the exclusive economic zone is not another state's possession. Ut alien. It's nobody's possession. And so in the classical formulation of the concept of transboundary harm, potentially does not apply to the areas beyond national jurisdiction. Now, because I'm briefing this, I'm pleading this precise issue today before the International Court of Justice, I'm not able to tell you all that I've researched or done until we actually publish our papers. But I have been struggling mightily with the concept of getting around this principle that the limitation of transboundary harm is only to another's possession. And I have had to refer back to Article 38 of the ICJ statute, which are the sources of international law, that everyone here will know, and to think clearly, reviewing those sources. They are international conventions showing rules recognized by the contesting states, international custom as evidence of a general accepted practice, the general principles of law recognized by civilized nations, and then as a subsidiary, not as important, judicial decisions and the writings of well-renowned jurists, professors of law. What can we derive from those entities, from those sources of law, as an answer to this problem, which as a reminder is that the traditional formulation means there's no protection outside of national jurisdiction. And the answers I found are likely to be based on several items. The first is a purely factual basis. When our oceans are harmed, they also harm all of us within our national boundaries. So, on a factual basis, this isn't a complete answer for a variety of reasons. On a factual basis, one might argue that preservation of biodiversity outside the EEZs is necessary to protect everyone's biodiversity within their own national jurisdictions. That's a good argument, but it's not complete, because then you would be permitting certain levels of harm within the 95 or 98% of the ocean's volume, as long as they don't harm coastal areas, which is not ideal. The other concept that could be used is whether there's an obligation separate and apart from the obligation of transboundary harm to preserve the climate and the environment of the Earth. Now, there is some good argument for this on very ancient sources, Mesopotamian, Manusmriti, there are several arguments, but to be frank, the formulation is difficult to make in the Western law concepts, which predominated international law thinking today. Finally, there seems also to be a very good argument that there is an obligation to avoid the tragedy of the commons. That there is an obligation actually to preserve access to such environmental resources as are available today to future generations. Now that's a very important concept for the purposes of outside of the areas beyond national jurisdiction, for the obvious reason that we could end up preserving these. We should preserve at least these self-renewing resources such as the fisheries, or the oxygenation, or the oxygenation capabilities of seaweed and kelp for the purposes as an international obligation. I promised this would be not so long, and I will get to it. My final point is very quickly that in addition to all of those, there are a multiplicity of treaties that have direct correlation to this concept. And just to run through some of them, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Paris Agreement, the Vienna Convention on the Protection of the Ozone Layer, the Convention on Biological Diversity, the Rio Declaration, and most importantly, the Bridgetown Declaration, could be seen as international conventions that show, out of a sense of legal obligation, states' desire to protect biodiversity beyond national jurisdictions. So, first of all, thank you to the presenters for inviting me, thank you to the other speakers, and thank you for accepting me out of turn due to my time commitments.
Thank you, Mr. Gunjan Sharma. Now the next speaker is Dr. Sara Sefroui, Associate Professor Abdul Malik Esadi, University, Morocco. The topic is BBNJ development in the law of the sea. Over to you, Dr. Sara.
Yes. I hope you can hear me. Yeah. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Dr. Sara Sefroui, professor at the 10th-year law faculty in the University of Arithmetic Study in Morocco. And I would like to start my presentation today by expressing my sincere gratitude to the Indian Society of International Law for extending this invitation. It is an honor to be here virtually to discuss a topic of paramount importance, the development of the BBNJ within the framework of the law of the sea. I appreciate the opportunity to share insights and engage in a dialogue with this esteemed community. I would like also to mention that regrettably, due to the limited notice period of this invitation, I was unable to allocate time for the preparation of the PowerPoint presentation. The subject of BBNJ is very relevant and important as it addresses the conservation and sustainable management of our oceans and shared responsibility that transcend the national boundaries as it was said before. So before starting this topic, let me take a moment to acknowledge the Indian to acknowledge the Indian Society of International Law for their commitment to fostering this discussions on such virtual vital issues. So on Friday, March 4th, at 8 a.m., negotiations continued in the United Nations cafeteria. Since 1 a.m., the chairperson of the Intergovernmental Conference dedicated to biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, the BBNJ, negotiations had decided to extend the discussions in pursuit of a consensus. Originally scheduled to conclude by midnight on Friday, March 3rd, the negotiations would have persisted for 38 hours under unique circumstances. The fifth Intergovernmental Conference aimed to reach an agreement on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction. It had already convened in August and was extended to for 2 weeks from February 20th to March 4th, 2023 at the United Nations headquarters in New York. It was on a Saturday night around 10 p.m. that an acceptable compromise was reached on the English text of the agreement. This is a momentous international event, as no multilateral treaty has been adopted by the UN in 23 years. Such an event is all the more remarkable given the particularly tense international context. Area beyond the jurisdiction ABNJ, encompassing approximately 2/3 of the world's ocean, are a global commons belonging to humanity as a whole rather than a specific entity. Commencing in 2018, following more than a decade of research and 2 years of preparatory committee meetings, the United Nations member states initiated negotiations for a novel international legal binding instrument with the objective of promoting the conservation and sustainable utilization of marine biological diversity in area beyond national jurisdiction. This comprehensive treaty incorporating both binding and voluntary measures seek to enhance the effective implementation of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, as it has said in the beginning, in the introduction of this session. Primarily focusing on safeguarding and preventing this extensive expand through enhanced collaboration and cooperation among diverse stakeholders. Both the preamble and the operative sections of the treaty underscore the imperative to address the decline in biological diversity and the degradation of the oceanic ecosystem. So this deterioration is notably driven by the impact of climate change on marine ecosystems, including rising temperatures, ocean deoxygenation, and ocean acidification, pollution as well, including plastic pollution. And sustainable resource utilization as well. Additionally, the treaty strives to promote global scientific research efforts. Also, the treaty endeavors to ensure compatibility with the existing roles and responsibilities, if I may say, of the various stakeholders involved. Notably, it places significant emphasis, especially for developing nations, on rectifying existing inequalities and equitable sharing of benefits, including access to resources found in the ABNJ and the associated digital sequence information. So these benefits encompass a wide array of assets, such as information on collection activities, samples, data relevant to publication, patent, and commercialization. The treaty also imposes specific requirements for sharing monetary benefit derived from the commercial utilization of marine genetic resources from ABNJ and the associated digital sequences information. So on June 19th, 2023, the BBNJ treaty was unanimously adopted by nearly 200 countries. The treaty encompassed the triangle, 12 parts, 76 articles, and 2 annexes, spanning around 53 pages of text. So this monumental achievement reflects more than 2 decades of international cooperation involving a diverse array of stakeholders, extending beyond national to encompass scientists, indigenous people, local communities, civil society, academic and research institutions, as well as the private sector. So the BBNJ Treaty's objective is to ensure the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction for the present and in the long term, through effective implementation of the relevant provisions of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, and further international cooperation and coordination. So the key elements of the BBNJ Treaty are first, the marine genetic resources, including the fair and equitable sharing of benefits. The second one is the area-based management tools, including marine protected areas. The third one is the environmental impact assessments. And the fourth one is the capacity building and transfer of marine technology. So I will just give a brief presentation of definitions or some elements of each of these key issues very briefly. So according to or in relation to the marine genetic resources,
Dr.
including
Sarah,
the fair and equitable, yes?
Can you wind up in 1 or 2 minutes?
I'm sorry, I cannot hear you.
Can you wind up soon? Can you finish soon?
Yes, okay, right. So how much time do I still have?
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Yeah, please. We need to have a discussion. There is an audience very eagerly waiting to discuss what you've spoken and others have spoken. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Sorry, sorry for that.
So, yeah. So, what is a marine genetic resource? The BBNJ Treaty defines the marine genetic resource in Article 1.8. So, I will not go through details into this. But this is one of the 4 substantive elements, so-called, in the 2011 package deal that countries decided to include in the treaty. So this element is part of the treaty because biodiversity belongs to all and no one in particular. It is a global common. For the area-based management tools, very briefly, including the MPAs, is one of these substantive elements, and the treaty is defined in Article, defining this area-based management in Article 1, Paragraph 1, and Article 1, Paragraph 9. So, just to conclude very briefly, because the presentation, I thought that it was around 20 minutes. UNCLOS remains relevant in today's area as the constitutional for the oceans, and this constitution has remained the strong foundation for the international community to consolidate rules and regulations in the conservation and optimum utilization of the ocean resources, protection and preservation of the marine environment from pollution and marine scientific research. So after more than 40 years, the convention has stood the test of time and become a living treaty where new legal instruments are nourished and sprout to address pressing issues in the modern world. The conclusion of the BBNJ agreement has marked the international community's commitment to transitioning to also the blue economy, which is a new concept where the use of ocean resources for economic growth and improvement of the livelihood must be accompanied by the duty to preserve the health of the ocean ecosystem. Thank you for your attention, and I'm open to a discussion, and I hope it will not last too long, because I won't be able to stay more time with you until the end of the discussion if it is long, as I have another commitment afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sarah. I'm sorry for cutting into your time, but we are having a discussion now. I'm sure people who have heard you would want to have some questions. Yes, Ambassador.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can I be heard? Okay. Can I be heard or not? I'm actually hoping I can be heard by our colleagues abroad. Nice to see you, Dr. Safre, and also my good colleague, our former colleague, alas. Well, particularly nice to see Dr. Gandhi. Can you see me, actually? Our dear colleague and your predecessor in your position. Anyway, I'm very pleased to be here, particularly under your chairmanship, or your able chairmanship, I must add. You said a few things in yourself in introduction, which gave me some food for thought, but I would have to begin by thank you, Dr. Safre, for putting us into the context of the UN building. I've been very much I spent years and years in the cafeteria you referred to, and many important engagements were actually made there rather than in the formal buildings. I thank Mr. Sharma also for bringing us up to date on the relationship with the climate change advisory opinions. I wish him the very best to try to put some legal content on what is being faced there. I would, alas, point out that the documents that he referred to at the very end, I was involved in the elaboration of many of them, and there were very concentrated efforts made to make sure that they would not be given any legal binding content. And so this is why I'm coming back to our agreement here. If we look at the wording of the agreement, there's a lot left to be done to be implemented. And I attach some importance to the institutionalization of the process, which I hope will lead to something more than we have now, that we see that we will wait and see, as you were saying yourself, Chairman, about what the prospects will be. And just one final point, for Dr. Koka, you mentioned about the IUU fishing, and I was wondering about the statistics. We know it's dire, but I wonder whether, I think you said it was 80% of fishing is, your slide actually said the opposite, it was 20%. 20% is enough, but anyway, that's the question I have. Otherwise, thank you all of us for, oh, I see. Oh dear, it's very dire indeed. Despite all our efforts, we were speaking about the strategic stock. But anyway, but just to thank the panelists as a whole, and you, Chairman, for guiding us.
Thank you, Ambassador. Any questions? Yes, I want to go ahead, sir. Yeah.
I'm Commodore Goyal, retired Judge Advocate General of the Navy. My question to you, Luther, is what is India's stand on the BBG-NJ?
We will take a few more questions and then maybe we'll answer all of them. Yeah. Yes.
Good afternoon, all of you. Good afternoon, all of you. It's a pleasure to be here in a esteemed gathering. I have a question for the panel. I have actually two questions as to how would you see the environmental degradation which is happening because of space debris, especially in Earth, in a place called Point Nemo, which has become a big concern for the international community. And again, regarding the law of the seas, I had a doubt if I could address to Luther, sir. Sir, my doubt is China has recently come up with a map saying that the entire South China Sea, a sizable portion of the South China Sea is theirs. So how would you look at this development, considering the fact that South China Sea is a very melting pot and a hot bone of contention between China and the Quad countries, sir?
Any more questions? Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. I was just wondering, this nuclear water which Japan has let into the sea, would that be covered in some way by one of these laws which we have made? And is there any penalty which they could apply in case that is a decision which is not being taken with great thought?
This is, you're saying this Fukushima thing?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Yes, any more questions? Yeah, Amit.
So I just wanted to, I'm Amit Singh, I'm a life member in the Society International, on to the normative aspect of BBNJ. I suppose we consider conservation and sustainable use as the customary international norm. On to then coming obligations, ancillary supplementary to this is the dispute settlement and enforcement. I think you left upon, so if you could touch upon that.
Thank you. First, the panelists would touch upon, and finally, I will have my say. It's because I am the chair. Goyal sir, I'll answer your question in the end. Okay, that's, or I can answer it outside also. Yeah. Which of the panelists would want to answer this question? Dr. Kochhar, Dr. Gandhi, Mr. Sharma, Dr. Sara, you are free to answer if you could indicate.
Dr. Luther.
Yeah.
Dr. Luther, am I audible to you?
Yeah. Please go ahead.
Yeah, is there any question that is aimed at me, my presentation?
Yes, there were general questions.
Tell me.
Yeah, one was, with regard to India's stand on BBNJ.
Okay.
And the second one was with regard to, space debris, which is, generally falls in the high seas and many other places, especially with a point called as Earth Nemo. And there were also questions on, release of nuclear coolant in Fukushima and the liability regarding this, and questions regarding the normativity associated with conservation and sustainable use of genetic resources. You can answer any of these so that other panels can also have a chance.
Somebody asked me on China also.
Yeah. That's not related to the topic, but if you intend to do it, you can do it. Go ahead.
No, whatever I understood from you, because it is very poor audition. I would have just stayed there. It would be better for me to react fully. But what is the position taken by India on this? That it is only the government knows. I may not know up to date. Okay. So the concerned ministry people have to come and tell. Even they are not allowed to tell before the signature or ratification is over. The first point. And the second point is concerned. I explained in the course of my presentation, whatever the provisions of the ANN clause which are all not touched, they are all not untouched. So except, whatever is covered there, these are all only add-ons to me. And this is not, taking away their rights. So it is completely streamlining that in case of a biogenetic resources, so far it is a secretive act, now they made it is public. And in fact, it was public, we have pointed that even earlier, if it is voluntarily disclosed. I know that there are certain scientific organizations, they are working on that, they cooperate themselves, they know about what are all the scientific resources, the biogenetic resources which have been used for manufacturing drugs, pharmaceuticals, then food supplements, etc., etc. Now, what is important here is that there is a clear identity that the moment they go and search for it, and they have a kind of a tag that have produced it first. So it is an identification mark is there, the identifier is there first thing. Second, what is the proposal, how long that will go, and how long the whole research ends there. There is a periodic reporting. Then after that, if it is the biogenetic resources, from that, there is isolated compounds are made, and out of which some molecules are synthesized and the patented, whether for microorganisms are patented, and all the information will be made available, and that will be available publicly, and that can be accessed. Now there are two important things we have to see here. You see that if you closely read the convention, whatever the acts already for which they got the protection, IP or otherwise, and those things, all the details may not be made available if they entered into a kind of a declaration. That provision is given there. And second, in case of a fish, it is also a biogenetic resources, but at the same time it is a commodity. If it is a commodity and you cannot use it because it is you are free to do that, because that will be governed by the UNFSA. And if it is the biogenetic resources, then you have to, whether you have to utilize this for this purpose or not. And to that extent, you have to report to the, in fact, clearinghouse mechanism, and from there you will get it. This is the second thing, as far as I know. And third important thing, this about the China. I mentioned about the Chinese, the statement after the adoption, where they say that if it is a disputed territory, where the territorial claim is there, and perhaps they are not agreeing to that, that will come under this. And this is indirectly also hinted, indirectly or directly. You see that if you read the whole thing, the instrument, you can find that the sovereign question of the territory that will not be touched by this instrument. So the sovereignty issue will be tackled in a different forum. So the sovereignty cannot be questioned. When the sovereignty is questioned in those areas, and it will be taken to some other forum, not under this instrument. This is what I understand. If anything is I left out, you may ask, so that I will be able to.
Yeah. Dr. Gandhi, Dr. Kochi,
yes.
You have something to answer?
Yeah, there was one question about yes. You said about normative aspects of BBNJ. In this context, as far as the agreement is concerned, there are two mentions. One is about inter-industrial cooperation, and second is avoid dispute or no dispute as far as possible. So these are just two indicative things as far as the agreement is concerned. And then, of course, as Dr. Gandhi has already made clear, he said about fisheries when it comes to biogenetic resources and fisheries as genetic resources. So I already clarified that this agreement doesn't say anything, is blind to bioresources, exploitation of fishery per se. So it is only genetic resources, and that too in the digital sequence information aspect only. So not the genes per se, no IPR per se at this moment. So very cleverly this has been now, this normative aspect has been brought to take you away from that old era of access and benefit sharing of the CBD to an independent aspect where only the elites and the knowledgeable and having more financial power and more tools to exploit the sea can harness it and then keep it for the international community. And where, there is no question of talking on equitable sharing of benefits in that context, except for the sharing of the information.
Dr. Sara, Mr. Gunjan Sharma, you have any comments to make? Are they there? Okay. Let me then, try to answer some questions. Promoter Goel asked me. I think we have been supportive of the entire process of negotiations. And there are hiccups always in negotiations regarding, like it was in the Biodiversity Convention as well as the Nagoya Protocol on Access and Benefit Sharing of Genetic Resources. There are always these groupings of access as opposed to benefit sharing, but there the situation was different. The developing countries had the maximum genetic resources. The biggest biodiverse countries are all developing countries. Congo, Colombia, India, Malaysia, Indonesia, they have the genetic resources. As opposed to that regime that came in place, although that was very contentious regarding patenting, issues of sequencing, gene sequencing, as Dr. Kocher correctly said, that here many of those aspects which dealt with sustainable issues or sustainable management of the ocean resources beyond jurisdiction, many of them have already been settled through international treaties. You have fisheries conventions, you have the biodiversity, one component deals with marine biodiversity. There was a clear understanding that the treaty would not deal with biodiversity per se, but only, the genetic sequencing, and this ended a large amount of problems. Of course, there was India's very strong stand on the common heritage of mankind, not only as a purpose of what Amit asked as normativity, conservation, but many things got settled down because these were areas beyond national jurisdiction. They protect your interests up to the EZ. So these were common areas preserved for common benefit of mankind. The exploitability issue was something which always was with the developed countries. And like Arvind Pardo's statement, in the General Assembly, where this entire concept of common heritage of mankind came up, it got watered down. There are a lot of people who are unhappy that the concept has got watered down, but they are also happy that you have a legal regime in place. I think the biggest challenge is not to have the law on the subject. The biggest challenge is how you actually operate the law. And the best indicators in this regard can be the seabed authority, legal regime. You have a legal regime, you still don't have a pioneer investor. Maybe next year you may have a country very keen on starting really not only exploring but exploiting the polymetallic nodules. So learning from that process, I think it's well begun, is half done. I think India is by and large supportive of the process. I can't tell you more because we are preparing a cabinet note on that and things like that. But yes, we can discuss it later. So it's a positive note, and it would also be good to actually put in place implementation mechanisms for this. The real challenge is how do you really bring up this gene pool, or what they call as genetic sequencing samples, which can not only be, for a word not used, bioprospecting, but as opposed to bioprospecting, which had a particular connotation, not a normative one. It only meant those who can prospect go and prospect. As opposed to that, here you have the entire international community in one go. More specific questions, maybe I will not answer regarding China. Dr. Gandhi has answered, and also regarding issues of Fukushima. I think there is the IAEA regulations are very clear on that, and circulars are there, which I think the process has already got triggered to study what is being done. A scientific study is underway. They are pretty quick to react in any form of radiological emergencies, and I think the study is on to look at these scientific aspects. As regards,
yeah. Because the point is that a person, as a nation, a person has suffered some atomic tragedy in the past. They have got sufferings from the nuclear thing so much. Now you are asking for a liability from them. It is the context that where is global community involved? Where are the other powers who are simultaneously responsible, knowledgeable, and also competent to have mitigation activities done on that in the sea, doing anything. In that context, the famous this patent of Chakravarti and you can say US patent on microorganisms for the first time. Incidentally, I was sharing dais with him at one point in time. There was 25 countries invited, and I incidentally spaced towards him and asked any you can say physical activity done on the mass multiplication of the same microorganism on which patent has been obtained, and he rightly said that it is up to the GE to think about it. So the point is only for the sake of, you can say, having name in certain things. They say that we have achieved so much, and physically it is not being done by the countries who are competent and doing it. So thus we cannot blame Japan alone. It's a very small country. Thank you.
I think, I've been asked by the organizers to wind up. We are eating into lunchtime. We require more food, less food for thought. So I take this opportunity to thank all the presenters, Dr. Gandhi, Dr. Kocha, Mr. Gunjan Sharma, Dr. Sara, and of course all of you who have come to listen to this on a Sunday afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair, for ending at on time the session. That is the most important tough task for our organization. Now we are moving to the valedictory sessions. I invite our President, Sri Praveen Yashpal sir and Narendra sir to join on the diet.
But anyway, it's excellent. There is a lot of work, what is work done, and ISIL has a large number of persons. They come out with ideas, and so many discussions take place, which is very, very good. And as I said, that we have a large number of professors and lawyers. It's a good combination. We are doing extremely well, and I think I can only say thank you, thank you, thank you, and please join for lunch. Thank you.
May I request Narendra sir to give a vote of thanks.
Well, thank you everybody for the interest you have taken in participating in this 51st annual conference of the Indian Society of International Law. I thank the President, the members of the Executive Council, all the panelists who have presented papers, who have made presentations during these 2 days. I thank all the chairmen, and I also thank all those who have come, students, teachers, practitioners, everyone who has come to take part in this conference and to contribute by their presence and the support they provide to us, and also by contributing to the conference through the questions and the discussions. So I thank everybody. I think we have had some very fruitful discussions, and we hope to continue working on these areas, and we would like to see you again in future. And for the present, of course, I invite all of you for lunch, which is upstairs and on the 2nd floor. And with that, we close this 51st annual conference. Thank you.
Dr. Parneet Kaur and Kanika and Rashti will distribute the certificate here. And those who want to receive, they can collect from here. You want to be here, sir? This is only those who want to receive certificate they can. Because many of them are live, but they didn't require that.
Aniruddha Chaudhary. भूमिका नंदा आ गया श्रीनिवास बुरा डॉक्टर रश्मि सालपेकर
हेलो एक्सक्यूज मी सॉरी
ऋषभ गुप्ता सुधीर वर्मा मैम अनुज अग्रवाल डॉक्टर सुधीर कोचर, विकेश राम त्रिपाठी, भूमिका नंदा, अनमोल मोटवानी, अर्चना सिंह, इवनीत कौर वालिया, दिनेश कुमार, जीवंतिका गुलाटी, अजय भूपेंद्र जायसवाल, पुलतस्य शुक्ला, जीवंतिका, पुलतस्य शुक्ला, राधा रंजन, अशोक, नवीन साजू, प्रियांशा बडोनी, नवीन साजू, अरुणव बैनर्जी, अमृता वर्मा, अमृता वर्मा, हर्षित उपाध्याय, सुरभि मिश्रा, शिवाली मिश्रा, इधर आसिफ अली, प्रभात सिंह, सुधाकरन, हिमांशु यादव, बलराज सिंह मलिक, प्रज्वल, सौम्या राज सिंह, प्रशांत कुमार, सुमित किशोर, प्रदीप दीक्षित, आयत, मोहम्मद सलीम, भैरवी चंद्र, प्रदीप कुमार नाथ, सागर शिवम, मनीष ओझा, सागर शिवम, मनीष ओझा, सत्यनारायण, हिमांशु वार्ष्णे, लक्ष्य सिंह, प्रतिभा पांडा, कुमार कार्तिकेय, राहुल शर्मा, सानिया खन्ना, सुधीर वर्मा, दानिश कपूर, कुबेर सिंह, बराकत अली, मोहम्मद साद, मोहम्मद अजीज, ईश्वर सिंह, जयशंकर सिंह, अमित सिंह,
आपके लिए किसको
K.R. Nagraj, सुनील कुमार अग्रवाल, MP मेहमानी, शंभू चोपड़ा, डॉक्टर विनय कुमार सिंह, कनिका शर्मा,
डॉक्टर कनिका शर्मा,
anyone left?
डॉक्टर पनीर शर्मा, सॉरी परिणीत कौर, आपने
Anyone left?
Anyone has left out?
सुधीर वर्मा है अभी मैं रूम से ले ली
Left out?
Anyone wants to take a picture?
Come on.